Hello summoners and welcome back to another ProGuides video. My name is Kangas and today we'll be discussing the underrated picks on patch 10.23. We'll be going over the runes, builds, and playstyles to effectively solo carry your ranked games if you do decide to pick up these champions. But before all of that, today's question of the day is, so far what have been your sleeper OP picks for preseason? Everyone knows the flavor of the month picks, we cover those ourselves in our videos, but what picks do you think are OP that you don't see anyone else abusing yet? Be sure to let us know in the comments down below. And do be sure to check out our new Wild Rift channel so you can stay up to date on what's best in the mobile version of the game. Now, let's dive into the video.
To start things off, Quinn is a champ that's perfect for terrorizing solo Q. Between her range attacks, Q's nearsighted effect, and E's ability to push off of enemies and nullify attempts at closing the gap, she can be especially tilting for the melee bruisers that are so strong in the current meta. And while tilting your own lane opponent is sometimes enough to win a game on its own, when their mental game is a bit better than that, your ult gives you a way to roam and affect the rest of the map, with no cooldown at all. For runes, you're going to want to run Electrocute, Cheap Shot, Eyeball Collection, Relentless Hunter, Nimbus Cloak, and Celerity. Item-wise, you're going to start Doran's Blade and build into Eclipse, Berserker's Greaves, Collector, Infinity Edge, Edge of Night, and Mortal Reminder. Like other extremely snowbally lane bullies, you're going to want to run Ignite with Quinn. So like I said before, Quinn is super good at bullying her lane opponents, but don't just face roll your keyboard and expect to win. Instead, be a bit mindful of what each ability should be used for. Constantly auto attack your lane opponent if they go for CS, using Q to mark them with your passive when you can. Against weaker opponents that are forced to roll over and give you control of the lane, it's fine to punish them even further. But against champs like Renekton or Darius that can punish you if you waste it, sit on the E cooldown to prevent them from ever making a move. While most champs have to wait for their tower to be down to really affect other lanes, Quinn's ability to shove fast and roam with ult almost gives her a similar feeling to Qiyana in the mid lane. You can make it from top to mid in just seconds to gank the enemy laner if they ever overextend, with almost guaranteed success if your own mid has any type of CC. And be sure to keep wards down in the enemy jungle, since you can also just invade and harass or even outright kill the enemy jungler if you find them on low HP in the middle of their clear. You'll want to get an advantage early and press it hard, as Quinn doesn't provide much more than her raw damage and roaming. Once you get to the later stages, she definitely still does a lot of damage, but her lack of engage tools or AoE means that she doesn't provide quite as much to teamfights as other top laners. Kled is our other top, and despite being in the game for over 4 years, his unique kit makes him pretty hard to play against, especially since he's pretty rare and you don't really get to practice against him that much. His scrappy kit makes him a strong duelist and skirmisher, and his ult enables not just him, but his entire team to get into the fray for those 5v5s. For runes, you'll be running Conqueror, Triumph, Alacrity, Last Stand, Transcendence, and Gathering Storm. For items, you'll start Doran's Blade and build into Gore Drinker, Tiamat, Merc Treads, or Plated Steel Caps, Black Cleaver. Then you'll turn Tiamat into Ravenous Hydra, finish out with Asterix Gauge and a Death Stance. His first few levels are very much reliant on waiting on his somewhat long cooldowns, but landing your skill shots gives you a pretty solid chance of winning any trade. As you max out your abilities, the cooldowns get pretty low, giving you chance after chance to fish for an engage on the other laner with your bear trap. Hitting it not only gives big damage and a way to stick to your opponent, that nasty built-in 60% Grievous Wounds effect is great for dealing with the innate healing that many top laners come with. While playing for your own lane is fine, a well-timed roam to bottom can really catch the enemy laners off guard. So look to do that if your wave is in a good spot and the enemy bot lane is pushing up as you're walking down there. If done at the right time, you can even pull off this gank and use your TP to avoid missing much back in your own lane. Once you hit 2 or 3 items, you'll be set for winning in side lanes, but don't shy away from teamfights. Your ult can be absolutely huge for giving otherwise lacking teams a way to force their way into a 5v5. But when that major cooldown isn't available, just sit in the side lane to soak up farm and pressure those towers. Moving to the jungle, our first underrated pick is Amumu. Is he even underrated at this point? He's always been a terror in lower elo brackets, being considered a part of the Bronze Zodia, but he's actually doing good in pretty much all elos at the moment. He has a pretty quick jungle clear, and on top of that, with his Q's long-range stun, you can even pull off some otherwise hard-to-reach early ganks as long as you're good at skill shots. For runes, you'll want Conqueror, Triumph, Tenacity, Last Stand, Cheap Shot, and Ravenous Hunter. For items, you'll start with Hailblade and build into Sunfire Aegis, Sork Shoes, Demonic Embrace, Abyssal Mask, Thornmail, and Gargoyle Stoneplate. While I did say you have the chance to pull off some early ganks, make sure your main focus is on power clearing the jungle. Falling behind means you'll be blown up in fights, and aside from his initial engage, Amumu really shines in these extended fights where he does a ton of damage over time with all of his AoE. While the general advice to clear first and gank after can apply to many champs, it's especially true for Amumu. And when it finally is time to pull off those ganks, make sure to walk in with an angle on the enemy laners. Your ult's huge radius means that even if they try to flash past you, you can still hit an ult. And then you can follow up with your Q to layer that CC and secure the kill. In teamfights, hitting a huge ult can look pretty cool, but make sure you're going for quality and not quantity. That is, it's better to lock down priority targets such as a hyper carry like Jinx over hitting a 2 or 3 man ult on the front line. Be patient, and when the window opens up, go for it. Our second jungle pick is Skarner. The hype around him may have died down, but his win rate certainly hasn't, and there's no reason to stop abusing him in solo queue now. Like Amumu, this tanky CC bot has a fast and healthy clear, but where Amumu has AoE CC and damage in teamfights, Skarner excels at just picking one target to lock down, and he does it super well. And since his ult is point and click, it's pretty foolproof way to deal with a singular threat on the enemy team. For runes, you'll want Phase Rush, Nimbus Cloak, Celerity, Water Walking, Triumph, and Alacrity. For items, you'll want to start with Hailblade and build into Turbo Chem Tank, Plated Steel Caps, Dead Man's Plate, Force of Nature, Thornmail, and Gargoyle Stoneplate. The key to making Skarner work is his Spires. Fighting without them makes you feel borderline worthless, while fighting in one your team controls makes you a complete monster. You can even 1v1 most champs in the game early as long as you're fighting on your terms, and that strength extends to 2v2 and 3v3 skirmishes, as long as you land your E and follow up with an auto for the stun. And of course, once you're 6, you'll want to look to gank every time your ult is available. The point and click suppress should be a kill 100% of the time if you're making the right decisions. With this super tanky build, you'll want to make sure you're doing the most in terms of CCing opponents once it's time to fight full-on 5v5s. If your E marks more than one opponent, make sure to take the time to auto each one of them. Those stuns really add up. Once you find a priority target, use ult to drag them into your team, and the fight should be all but won. Skarner is mechanically super easy, and instead relies on focusing on making the right choices in pathing and when and how to pull off ganks and force fights. If you want some guidance on how to do these better, be sure to visit us at ProGuides.com, where our challenger level coaches can help you with those concepts and more to help you level up your game. You could also check out Cat and Flower's stream, but that might be less educational. Moving along to the mid lane pool, our first pick is Rumble. He's both a lane bully and an exceptional team fighter, and he really doesn't have a weak point in the game currently. Between his Q's constant AoE damage and his W making him naturally tanky, he's really good at dealing with melee assassins, while his pushing power and lack of a normal resource means he can outshove mages without worrying about going out of mana. He really doesn't have many bad lanes, but Kassadin is definitely one, so be sure to ban him when you're planning on playing Rumble. For runes, you'll be wanting Arcane Comet, Nimbus Cloak, Celerity, Scorch, Taste of Blood, and Ravenous Hunter. For items, start Doran's Ring or Doran's Shield against super poke heavy enemies, then build into Riftmaker, Sork Shoes, Demonic Embrace, Zoni's Hourglass, Oblivion Orb, Void Staff, and then finish off that Morellonomicon. As early as level 1, you pretty much have full lane priority as Rumble. You don't have to worry about mana, and as long as you're not going to be level 2 ganked by a champ like Xin Zhao or Jarvan, you're good to shove away, so you can always have the first move for your jungler. Once you pick up more levels, you'll go from a wave clear bot to a total bully. Champs that prefer to all in will find themselves unable to match your damage in trades, while mages that rely on more poke heavy playstyles will waste their time and mana as your shield helps to shrug them off. Once the wave is cleared, you can look to harass the other laner, but usually the better choice is to opt for a roam. Your ult can make for some free ganks if the enemy is immobile and has no flash available. The biggest learning curve with Rumble are learning to manage his heat resource, and also landing his ult, with the latter definitely taking the most time. But once you're able to hit those equalizers at the perfect angle in a team fight, you'll be melting your opponents and carrying your entire team to victory. While Kayle definitely isn't as OP as Rumble in the early stages of the game, she is an incredibly strong hyper carry once she picks up steam. Be sure to play it safe early game and focus on scaling to carry later game teamfights. The name of the game is survival. More time alive means more gold and more experience. If you die early and fall too far behind, you'll just never actually reach the points in the game where you can carry. For runes, you'll want Press the Attack, Overheal, Alacrity, Coup de Grace, Eyeball Collection, and Ravenous Hunter. For items, start out with Doran's Ring and build into Leeching Leer early on, but finish Gnasher's Tooth and Berserker's Greaves before turning Leer into a completed Riftmaker. Then you pick up Lichbane, Rabadons, and Morellonomicon. Buy an Oblivion Orb sometime earlier in the game if you need the Grievous Wounds. When I say Kayle is weak early, I mean it. Your entire focus should be getting to level 6, with the farm you get before then being risk-free. In fact, sometimes it's better to just give up early CS to make sure the wave is pushing to your side, and then take the farm you can once the wave is for sure on your side of the lane. Once you do reach level 6 and acquire ranged autos, things become a bit better, but things become full on easy mode once you hit level 11. Between your items Omnivamp and your AoE auto attacks, you'll be able to instantly clear waves while remaining at full HP, making you a farming machine. While Kayle is a hyper carry in the later stages of the game, she's pretty strong at this form, as long as you have Riftmaker and Gnasher's Tooth completed. If things are going well, or you're even just a bit behind at the stage of the game, then things are working quite nicely, since your next power spike at 16 is massive, and will likely end up being almost an insta-win. You're practically unduelable in the side lane, and your insane DPS means you can shred through even the tankiest of front lines. So there really isn't a bad choice. Just make a plan and stick with it, and you'll be ranking in the LP. Quick disclaimer, both carries and supports in the bottom lane are reliant on each other, since champs in these roles won't exactly be running at each other in the 1v1. So bear that in mind a bit as we talk about these next 4 champs. Now for the bot lane. Our first carry is Kog'Maw. Much like Kayle, he's a hyper carry with some of the highest damage output in the game in the later stages. But unlike Kayle, he's actually not that bad early. In fact, with the right lane setup, he can even be one of the stronger 2v2 laners. For runes, you'll be looking at Lethal Tempo, Presence of Mind, Bloodline, Coup de Grace, Taste of Blood, and Ravenous Hunter. For items, start out with Doran's Blade and build into Kraken Slayer, Berserker's Greaves, Winsu's Rageblade, Rune-Dance Hurricane, Tiamat, Blade of the Ruin King, and finish off that Ravenous Hydra. If you have an aggressive support, you can actually play to win the lane, with Braum being an especially good partner for this game plan. But if you're with an enchanter, especially Kog's favorite enchanter Lulu, you're completely fine to play the scaling game instead, waiting on the 2 or 3 item spike for yourself, and your support to pick up key items, especially Ardent Sensor, to shred through the enemy team in seconds. Kog'Maw is completely immobile, so be sure to plan out how you're going to play out team fights in advance. Since you don't have dashes, flashes, or speed-ups, you'll rely on positioning behind your front line away from danger and using the budget self-peel that your E slow provides to prevent danger from reaching you. If you want some advice on how to make this all work, make sure to visit ProGuides.com, where one of our challenger level coaches can give you some pointers on how to die less and carry harder. Whether it's as a support or carry in the lane, Swain has been doing really well down in bottom for quite a long time. And in preseason, things haven't really changed. In the earlier levels, hitting an E means a good trade, but once you pick up some item components, just one snare can lead to an all-in for a kill with an aggro support. For runes, you'll want to run Electrocute, Cheap Shot, Eyeball Collection, Ravenous Hunter, Presence of Mind, and Tenacity. For items, start out with Doran's Ring and build into Liandry's Anguish, Sorc Shoes, Zhonya's Hourglass, Demonic Embrace, Rylai's Crystal Scepter, and Morellonomicon. Ideally, you'll be laning with a kill lane support like Leona or Nautilus, making it super easy for you to harvest souls and giving you an easier time to hit your spells. But even if you get stuck with an enchanter, you can still make Swain work. If your E lands, be sure to always immediately drop a W on the rooted opponent for some extra damage, and a free soul for your passive. While it may not seem like much, once you have quite a few souls stacked up, they really add to your tankiness, especially once your ult is going. Once it comes time to teamfight, one important thing to note is that Swain isn't some scrappy skirmisher who enjoys fighting constantly. You'll want to only really fight when your ult is available, since without it, you're massively gated by your W, E, and passive cooldowns, preventing you from providing much needed DPS. But when it is up, your damage output is consistent and really high, with the explosion at the end giving you a huge burst of damage to finish off your opponents. With her E being changed to a shield that she can now grant to allies on patch 10.22, Annie has been doing great as a support, but most people are still sleeping on her, so stop missing out and pick her up. Her high auto attack range gives her constant poke in lane, and if the opponent gets too close, her point and click CC and high burst damage gives her a super easy way to punish them. She's one of the few supports that has poke and engage, and with her even having a shield, she really doesn't leave much to be desired. For runes, make sure to run Summon Airy, Mana Flow Band, Transcendence, Scorch, Biscuit Delivery, and Cosmic Insight. For items, start with Spell Thief's Edge, which will upgrade into Shard of True Ice, and then build into Imperial Mandate, Ionian Boots, Staff of Flowing Water, Ardent Censer, and Zonia's Hourglass. You can also try out a more standard AP Annie build, but this is our suggestion for consistency as a support. In lane, be sure to constantly harass. With 625 auto range, you really don't have an excuse to not be bullying your opponents. If the opponent won't come close enough to trade with spells, feel free to stack up your passive by using Q on the wave. But don't deny your carry from farming. Against stronger all-in lanes, use your stun to disengage. Or if you have the more aggro carry on your side, you can even start fights with your easy-to-land CC. Even with this Airy Page and more Enchanter style build, your damage will be high, especially early, so don't be afraid to play aggressive. While you may not have the assassination power of a full AP mid Annie on a support's budget, a Flash Tibbers can still be a huge play to turn a game in your team's favor, so constantly play around your own vision while denying the enemy vision and play for picks around those objectives. Our last underrated pick for this patch is the Flamer himself, Brand. Since he finally received some love via changes aimed at making him a better mid lane, he's doing even better as a support. Surprise, surprise, Riot, when you give a mage even better poke, they become stronger in a role that highly favors poke mages. For runes, you'll want Dark Harvest, Cheap Shot, Eyeball Collection, Ravenous Hunter, Mana Flow Band, and Scorch. For items, start off with Spell Thief's Edge, which will become Shard of True Ice. Then you build into Leandri's Anguish, Sork Shoes, Demonic Embrace, Rylai's Crystal Scepter, and Void Staff. In lane, your gameplay will almost solely center on using your W and E to poke down opponents that wander too close. And it's not just about being in range of you. If they're outside of your normal cast range, you can just target minions with E to spread it onto your opponents. And if the minions are already ablaze with your passive, the range is doubled to 600. To put that into perspective, if a minion is affected by your passive and your opponent wants to avoid your E's splash, they have to stand at Ashe's auto attack range to stay safe. That's some crazy pressure. Aside from the great poke, if you're playing with a strong early AD carry, Brand isn't lacking in the all-in department either. As long as you combo right, he comes with a stun and a huge amount of damage for hitting 3 spells in a row. And when paired with an AD carry that knows how to follow up, you can easily set them up for a one trade, if not a kill. Once you're 6, ult also gives you a slow for forcing fights, and unlike your Q, you can even use it in a minion wave without the enemy being able to dodge it. While lane bullying is nice, Brand truly shines in 5v5 teamfights. One solid combo and you'll get passive proc after passive proc exploding across the fight. Don't be surprised if you top the damage charts in long games.
And that wraps things up for our underrated champs on patch 10.23. Remember to let us know what champs you think are sleeper OP in the comments down below. We always love to see what you guys have to say. I can't wait to see you back in the next video. Until then, good luck on the Rift, stay hydrated, and wash your hands.